A tycoon caught his wife harming Maid's daughter. One decision ended everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was a bright afternoon at the magnificent estate of Jonathan Kingsley, a self-made billionaire known for his business empire and his luxurious lifestyle. His mansion sat on a sprawling piece of land, complete with lush gardens, a private lake, and a state-of-the-art home theater. The walls of the mansion were lined with priceless art, and the air smelled of fresh roses and polished marble. Jonathan was the epitome of success. But today, something unexpected would shatter his perfect world. Inside the house, Jonathan's wife, Veronica, had been behaving strangely for weeks. Jonathan was a busy man, managing multiple companies, but he trusted his wife to run their household and take care of the staff. However, recently, there had been whispers among the staff. The housekeepers, the gardeners, and even the butlers seemed to exchange nervous glances when the topic of Veronica came up. Jonathan had been hearing rumors of strange behavior, but he had dismissed them, thinking they were just idle gossip. That was until the fateful afternoon. Jonathan had returned home earlier than usual, catching a glimpse of his wife in the hallway as she spoke harshly to a young girl in the corner. The girl, Lily, was the maid's daughter. She had been living with her mother, who worked as a maid at the Kingsley estate. Lily was quiet and shy, with big brown eyes that never seemed to meet anyone's gaze. Jonathan had always felt a pang of sympathy for her, seeing how she had to endure the harsh treatment of the staff. But what he saw today was beyond anything he could have imagined. Veronica was standing over Lily, her face twisted in anger as she shouted at the young girl. Lily stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists, but she did not dare speak. Jonathan's heart sank as he watched the scene unfold. He could hear Veronica's words clearly now, sharp and cutting, as she mocked Lily for being worthless and nothing more than a servant's child. Without thinking, Jonathan stepped forward, his voice a deep growl that stopped Veronica in her tracks. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Veronica, caught off guard, quickly composed herself. She turned to face him, her face masked with a thin smile. "Oh, Jonathan, it's nothing. Just some minor disciplinary actions with Lily. She was misbehaving, that's all." But Jonathan wasn't buying it. He could see the fear in Lily's eyes, and the way she shrunk away from Veronica's presence. His blood ran cold as he realized that something was terribly wrong. He stepped closer to Lily, his protective instincts kicking in. "Lily, what's happening?" he asked softly, kneeling down to her level. Lily looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper, but it was enough to shatter everything. She hurt me, sir," she said, her voice trembling. Jonathan stood up slowly, his fists clenching at his sides. He turned to Veronica, his expression hardening. "You've been hurting her?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Veronica's face paled as she realized that her secret was no longer safe. For the first time, Jonathan saw the cracks in her facade. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted, was capable of something he couldn't have fathomed. His mind raced as he processed the reality of what was happening. The woman he had chosen to be the mother of his children, the one he had protected and provided for, was hurting an innocent child. But as the anger swelled inside him, Jonathan made a decision that would change everything. Without a word, he walked to the nearest phone and dialed the number of his lawyer. Veronica watched in stunned silence as Jonathan made arrangements to have her removed from the estate immediately. The gravity of the moment was not lost on her, and for the first time, she realized that her actions had consequences. As the security team arrived to escort her out, Jonathan turned to Lily and offered her a warm smile. "You're safe now," he said, his voice filled with compassion. Lily's eyes welled with tears, but this time, they were tears of relief. In one swift decision, Jonathan had ended a cycle of cruelty and made it clear that no one, not even his wife, would be allowed to harm those under his roof. After Jonathan had made the decision to protect Lily, the young maid's daughter, the weight of what had just transpired began to settle in. The entire atmosphere in the mansion had shifted. The silence that had filled the halls moments ago was now heavy with a sense of justice. Jonathan paced the hallway, his thoughts racing. He was no stranger to difficult decisions, but this decision, felt different. He had just dismantled the life he had built with Veronica, a life he thought was perfect, for the sake of a child who had been suffering in silence for far too long. Outside, the staff moved with purpose, securing the estate and ensuring that Veronica's departure was swift and discreet. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gripped his chest. He had trusted Veronica, his wife, for so long. They had been partners, in business and in life, for years. To think that she could hurt an innocent child, to think that she had been capable of such cruelty, left him numb. He stood in front of the window, overlooking the expansive garden, his fingers tapping the cool glass as he watched the sun begin to dip behind the horizon. The estate was beautiful, but it no longer felt like home. Jonathan turned and walked back to the living room, where Lily was sitting on the couch, nervously clutching her hands together. She had been so quiet, so unsure of what would happen next, but Jonathan knew that her world was about to change forever. He sat down beside her, his voice calm but firm. "Lily, I want you to know that you are safe here. No one is going to hurt you anymore." The words hung in the air, but they weren't just for Lily. They were for Jonathan, too. He had to believe them. Lily looked up at him, her brown eyes wide with uncertainty. She was still so small, so fragile, but there was a spark of hope in her gaze that Jonathan hadn't seen before. He had given her the safety she so desperately needed, but he also understood that it would take time for her to trust again. "I don't know what will happen now," Lily whispered, her voice soft and shaky. "But thank you for helping me." Jonathan's heart clenched as he looked at her. He hadn't just saved her from Veronica's cruelty. He had saved her from a life of fear. But there was still so much more to do. He had to rebuild everything, not just for Lily, but for himself. As the evening wore on, Jonathan made the necessary calls to ensure that Veronica's assets were frozen and that she would have no claim to the estate. He would make sure that she never set foot in this house again. As for Lily, Jonathan would make sure that she received the best care, the best education, and most importantly, the love and safety she had never known. The next few days were a blur. The staff adjusted to the new reality, and Lily was slowly integrated into the household, though she remained cautious and reserved. Jonathan's protection was unwavering, but the journey ahead was still long. He had to prove to Lily, and to himself, that this was the right choice. As the days passed, the mansion slowly began to feel like a home again, a home that was filled with warmth, compassion, and trust. And while Jonathan's decision to stand up for what was right had shaken his entire world, he knew it was a decision that had to be made. He had to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, no matter the cost. The feeling of betrayal was still there, but it was slowly replaced with something stronger, a sense of purpose. Jonathan had made his choice, and he would live with it, knowing that he had done the right thing. He had not only saved a child's life, but he had also taken the first step in reclaiming his own. Ireland sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the cold glass of the mansion's grand living room window, her small hands folded in her lap. It had been a week since Jonathan had removed Veronica from their lives, and while the mansion had begun to feel safer, Ireland could still sense the lingering fear that clung to her. She'd lived in constant fear for so long that even the smallest signs of kindness felt foreign to her. Jonathan had offered her a life that she had never known, comfort, safety, and most importantly, the chance to be treated like a human being. But the scars of her past wouldn't heal overnight. Jonathan, on the other hand, had been doing everything he could to create a new, peaceful life for Ireland. He made sure she was enrolled in the best private school in the area, hired tutors to help her catch up on her education, and made it clear that she was to be treated like family by everyone in the house. But as he watched her grow more comfortable, he could see the walls she had built up around herself. He had saved her from Veronica, but saving her from herself was going to be the true challenge. One evening, Jonathan decided to break the silence that had fallen between them. He invited Ireland to join him for dinner in the grand dining room, a room that had seen countless meals and conversations over the years, but tonight, it felt different. It felt like the beginning of something new. "Ireland, I know this has been hard," Jonathan said gently as they sat down at the table. "But I want you to know that you don't have to be afraid anymore. This is your home now. You can trust me. Ireland hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on the cloth napkin in front of her. I don't know how to trust anyone, she whispered, her voice barely audible. For so long, I thought the only way to survive was to stay quiet and keep my head down. Jonathan reached across the table, his hand resting on hers. I know, Ireland. I understand. But you don't have to be silent anymore. You have a voice, and I want to hear it. You don't have to be afraid of what's to come. Ireland looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of uncertainty and hope. It was the first time in her life that someone had told her she didn't have to hide. Someone cared. She had always kept her emotions locked away, afraid that showing any vulnerability would make her weak. But Jonathan's words, his simple act of kindness, were starting to chip away at the walls she had built. Over the next few days, Jonathan made sure that Ireland knew she was safe in every way possible. He had a therapist come to the mansion to work with her, someone who would help her process the trauma she had endured and help her rebuild her trust in people. Ireland wasn't sure what to expect from these sessions, but she knew that Jonathan wouldn't let her face this journey alone. He had taken her under his wing, and for the first time in years, she began to feel like she had a future. But it wasn't just the therapy that helped. It was the little things. The way Jonathan made sure to check in with her every day, the way he treated her with dignity and respect, and the way he made her feel like she was more than just a servant's daughter. She wasn't just someone who had been pushed aside. She mattered. Jonathan knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew that the pain of the past wouldn't disappear overnight. But he was determined to help Ireland reclaim her life. As the weeks passed, Ireland began to open up more and more. She started to participate in conversations, ask questions about the world, and even smile again. It was a slow process, but every small step forward was a victory. One evening, Jonathan watched as Ireland sat at the grand piano in the living room, her fingers gently brushing the keys. He had never known that she had such a talent, but it seemed like the music was a way for her to express herself, a way to heal. Jonathan smiled, knowing that Ireland's journey to reclaim her life was only just beginning, but he was proud of the progress she had made. As he watched her play, he realized that she wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor, and with time, she would become someone even stronger. Ireland had come a long way since Jonathan had first taken her in. She had slowly started to trust him, and with that trust, she had begun to heal. But even with all the care Jonathan provided, the road to recovery was not a straight path. The scars from the past were deep, and while she was no longer afraid of Veronica's cruelty, she had yet to fully embrace the new life that was now offered to her. One afternoon, as Ireland sat on the porch overlooking the sprawling estate, Jonathan approached her. He could see the sadness that still lingered in her eyes, despite the progress she had made. She had stopped hiding from the world, but there was still a wall between them that had yet to come down. Ireland, Jonathan began gently, sitting down beside her. I know things are difficult, but I need you to know that you're not alone in this. I'm here, and I will always be here for you. Ireland didn't respond immediately. She looked out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the trees. Her mind was racing with thoughts she couldn't yet put into words. For so long, she had lived in fear, afraid to trust anyone. Jonathan's words, as kind as they were, made her feel vulnerable, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. I don't know how to be normal, Ireland finally whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to be the person you want me to be. Jonathan's heart ached for her. He had seen her struggle, and he understood that this wasn't just about giving her a new home. It was about teaching her how to live without fear, without shame, without hiding. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are, Ireland, Jonathan replied softly. You're not broken. You're not damaged. You're just you. Ireland turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But I've spent so long being scared. I don't know who I am without the fear. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a comforting smile. You'll figure it out, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan made it his mission to show Ireland that life didn't have to be a constant struggle. He encouraged her to find things that made her happy, to explore the world outside of the mansion, to go on walks in the garden, to visit the local library, and even to take up painting. At first, Ireland was hesitant, unsure of where to begin, but slowly, she found solace in the small, everyday moments. She started spending time with the staff, something she had never done before. She played chess with the butler, who taught her the game, and spent hours chatting with the housekeeper, learning how to bake her favorite cookies. One afternoon, as Ireland was painting in the garden, Jonathan walked by and stopped to admire her work. "You've got quite the talent," he said with a smile, looking at the landscape she had captured on the canvas. Ireland blushed, her face lighting up. "I've never really painted before," she admitted. "I didn't think I was good at anything." Jonathan sat down next to her, his voice warm. "You're good at more than you think." Ireland smiled shyly, her eyes meeting his for the first time in a long while without fear. "Thank you, Jonathan," she said, her voice soft but sincere. As the weeks turned into months, Ireland continued to grow stronger. She was still unsure of herself at times, but she no longer felt the weight of her past bearing down on her every second. With Jonathan's support, she was learning to trust again, to embrace the person she was becoming, and to live a life that was free from fear. Jonathan watched her, proud of how far she had come, but he knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome, but for the first time, Ireland had the strength to face them. And as long as Jonathan was by her side, she knew she would never have to face them alone. Ireland's life had shifted in ways she never thought possible. What had started as a journey of survival had slowly become one of growth and self-discovery. The mansion that once felt like a prison now felt like a sanctuary. As the months passed, she found herself smiling more, laughing more, and embracing the world around her. Jonathan had given her more than just a roof over her head. He had given her a second chance at life. But as the warmth of safety began to settle in, Ireland realized that the healing process wasn't just about rebuilding trust with Jonathan. It was also about understanding her own strength. One evening, as Ireland was walking through the garden, she noticed something different. The garden, which had once seemed too vast, too empty, now felt inviting. She stopped by a small fountain, watching the water gently cascade over the rocks. The sound was soothing, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel at peace. That's when Jonathan found her. "You've been spending a lot of time out here lately," he remarked, his voice warm as he approached. Ireland turned to face him, a soft smile spreading across her face. "It's peaceful," she said, her voice calm. "I like the quiet." Jonathan nodded, standing beside her. "You know, I was thinking. The other day, you've come such a long way." Ireland looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know if I'll ever be the same," she said quietly, almost to herself. "But I'm trying." Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a gentle squeeze. "You don't have to be the same," he said. "You're stronger now. You found a way to stand on your own. And I'm proud of you." The words hit Ireland harder than she expected. She had always felt small, insignificant. But here, with Jonathan, she realized that she wasn't just surviving, she was living. And she was no longer defined by her past. The days turned into weeks, and Ireland's confidence continued to grow. She excelled in school, impressing her teachers and peers with her intelligence and work ethic. But more importantly, she began to discover her passions. She enrolled in art classes, started volunteering at a local animal shelter, and even began to speak up more at family dinners, something she had never done before. Jonathan watched all of this from the sidelines, proud of the young woman Ireland was becoming. But he also knew that her journey wasn't finished. There was still a long road ahead, and he was committed to walking it with her. One afternoon, as Jonathan and Ireland sat in the library, he could see the change in her. She was no longer the shy, quiet girl who had first entered his life. She had grown into someone confident, someone who knew her worth. "I've been thinking," Ireland said, breaking the silence. "Maybe I should try out for the school play. I've always wanted to act, but I've never had the courage." Jonathan smiled, the same smile he had given her on that first day they met. "I think you should. You're more than capable of doing anything you set your mind to." Ireland's face lit up. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was capable of doing something just for herself. She wasn't living for anyone else's approval, and that was liberating. As the months passed, Ireland continued to surprise herself with her strength, her resilience, and her ability to overcome anything that came her way. Jonathan remained by her side, offering support and guidance when needed, but Ireland had finally found her voice. She was no longer the girl who was afraid to speak up, afraid to take risks. She was someone who had the courage to face the world head-on. And as she stood on the stage of the school theater for the first time, performing in front of an audience, she realized that the most important part of her journey wasn't just about escaping the past. It was about embracing the future and everything it had to offer. Ireland stood backstage, her heart racing as the final curtain rose. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where all of her fears, doubts, and insecurities would be put to the test. The school play was finally here, and Ireland had worked tirelessly for weeks preparing for her role. She had never imagined herself performing on stage, let alone in front of a crowd, but Jonathan's encouragement had pushed her to take that first step. As she waited for her cue, she thought about how far she had come since the first time she arrived at Jonathan's mansion, broken and afraid. She had spent so much of her life hiding, trying to remain invisible, but now, here she was, ready to stand tall and be seen. The lights above her flickered, signaling that her moment had arrived. With a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit her, and for a brief moment, everything went silent. She could hear the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears, but then she remembered Jonathan's words that had stayed with her through every challenge, every setback, and every triumph. You are stronger than you think. As she began her lines, her voice steady and confident, something incredible happened. The fear that once gripped her was gone. It was replaced with a sense of freedom, a sense of empowerment that she had never felt before. The audience was captivated by her performance, hanging on to every word she spoke. Ireland lost herself in the character she was portraying, no longer feeling like the scared girl who had walked into Jonathan's life so many months ago. By the time the play ended, the applause was deafening. Ireland stood center stage, a wide smile spreading across her face as she took her bow. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly heard. Jonathan was in the front row, clapping proudly. His face lit up with a smile, and in that moment, Ireland knew that everything she had done to get here, every step, every struggle, had been worth it. Later that night, after the play had ended, Ireland sat in the quiet of her room, reflecting on the evening. Her heart was still racing, but it was a different kind of excitement, a feeling of pride and accomplishment. She had done something she never thought possible. She had overcome her fears and stood up for herself, in front of an audience no less. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she realized that she had finally found the person she was meant to be. Jonathan's support had given her the strength to face her past, but it was her own courage that had brought her here. She was no longer the girl who had been silenced by fear. She was a young woman with a voice, and she was ready to use it. The next morning, Jonathan sat down with Ireland over breakfast, his usual warm smile on his face. "You were incredible last night," he said, his voice full of admiration. Ireland's eyes sparkled with excitement as she replied, "I never thought I could do something like that." Jonathan placed a hand on hers, his voice filled with sincerity. "You can do anything, Ireland. You've already proven that." Ireland smiled, feeling a sense of pride that she had never known before. She had come so far, and the road ahead was brighter than ever. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her own strength, and with Jonathan by her side, she knew there was nothing she couldn't accomplish. As she looked ahead to the future, Ireland felt ready for whatever came next. No longer afraid of what the world might throw at her, she was finally ready to live the life she had always dreamed of. Ireland had reached a point where she no longer recognized the girl she had been just a few months ago. Every day, she felt a little stronger, a little more confident. The fear that had once controlled her life no longer held power over her. And with every step she took towards healing, Jonathan was there to support her. One afternoon, Jonathan called Ireland into his office. He had a serious look on his face, something she had not seen in a while. He had been busy with business meetings all day, but today, it seemed different. As she walked into his office, she noticed the papers spread out in front of him, but it was not the business he wanted to discuss. "Ireland, I've been thinking about something," Jonathan said, his tone calm but firm. "You've come so far, and I think it's time to take the next step in your journey." Ireland was intrigued, but also a little nervous. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "You've always wanted to find your own path, haven't you?" he asked. Ireland nodded slowly, unsure where this conversation was going. "I want you to go to college. Jonathan said, his words settling in the air between them. I want you to experience life beyond this estate, to find your own place in the world. You've worked hard, and I believe you deserve the chance to pursue your dreams. Ireland's eyes widened. College? It was something she had never imagined in her wildest dreams. Growing up, it had always been a far-off idea, something that people like her could never afford. But here, in Jonathan's presence, it suddenly seemed possible. But what about here? She asked hesitantly, unsure how to handle the overwhelming emotions welling up inside her. I'm not saying you have to leave everything behind, Jonathan replied with a reassuring smile. I'll be here for you, every step of the way. But I think it's important for you to see the world, to grow, and to discover your potential beyond these walls. Ireland felt a lump form in her throat. This was a chance she had never thought she would get. Jonathan had always encouraged her to dream big, but now, he was giving her the opportunity to turn those dreams into reality. You deserve this, Ireland, Jonathan continued. You're not the same person you were when you first came here. You're stronger, more capable than you think. Ireland's heart swelled with gratitude. It was a kindness she had never known before. Jonathan was not just giving her a home, he was giving her a future. That night, Ireland sat in her room, staring out the window at the stars. Her mind was racing. She thought about everything she had been through, everything that had brought her here, and the overwhelming kindness Jonathan had shown her. She had gone from feeling like an invisible girl to someone who had the chance to change her life. The next morning, Ireland went to Jonathan with a sense of determination. I want to apply, she said, her voice steady. I want to go to college. Jonathan's smile was full of pride. I knew you would, he said, his voice full of encouragement. You're ready. Over the next few months, Ireland worked tirelessly on her college applications. With Jonathan's help, she applied to some of the best schools in the country. It was a nerve-wracking process, but Ireland no longer doubted herself. She had come so far, and now she had the confidence to pursue her dreams. When the acceptance letters finally arrived, Ireland was overwhelmed. She had been accepted into a prestigious college, one that she had never imagined attending. For the first time in her life, she realized that the future was hers to shape. Ireland had gone from being a scared, broken girl to someone who had the strength and the courage to chase her dreams. And with Jonathan's unwavering support, she knew that nothing was impossible. As she packed her bags and prepared to leave for college, Ireland felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was a new chapter in her life, and while it was scary, she was ready for it. She had found her voice, and she was ready to make her mark on the world. Ireland's first week at college was a whirlwind of emotions. It was everything she had dreamed of, but also more than she had ever imagined. She had gone from living in a mansion to sharing a small dorm room with a roommate she had just met. The campus was vast, filled with so many people, so many new faces, and yet Ireland felt a little lost. She was excited but also terrified, unsure if she truly belonged in this new world. The first few days were a blur of orientations, meet and greets, and navigating her classes. She found herself struggling to keep up with the pace of the academics. It wasn't that she wasn't capable, but the pressure to succeed, to prove herself, weighed heavily on her. For the first time in a long while, Ireland felt small, unsure, and out of place. But she had learned by now to face her fears head-on. She was no longer the girl who ran away from challenges. She remembered Jonathan's words, "You are stronger than you think." She had to remind herself of that every day. One afternoon, as she sat in the campus library, staring at a pile of textbooks, she felt the familiar sense of overwhelm creeping in. It wasn't just the academics, it was everything. She missed Jonathan. She missed the quiet, peaceful life she had left behind. But as she sat there, trying to focus on her assignments, something caught her eye. A flyer for an art exhibition was pinned to the bulletin board. It was a call for submissions from students. Ireland's heart skipped a beat. Art had always been her escape, her way of expressing herself when words failed her. It was the one thing that had never let her down. Ireland knew, deep down, that she had to submit something. It was her chance to remind herself of who she was, to find herself in this new chapter of her life. As the deadline approached, Ireland poured all of her energy into creating the piece. She worked late into the night, her hands moving across the canvas, each stroke of the brush a release of the tension and uncertainty that had built up inside her. The painting she created was more than just an assignment. It was a reflection of her journey. The colors, bold and vibrant, symbolized her strength, while the darker shades represented the pain she had endured. When the day came to submit her artwork, Ireland felt a sense of pride. No matter the outcome, she knew that the painting represented who she had become. It was a part of her, a piece of her story. As she handed the piece to the exhibition organizers, a sense of calm washed over her. She had faced her fear, and in doing so, she had rediscovered a part of herself she had nearly forgotten. A few weeks later, the exhibition opened, and Ireland's painting was displayed proudly among the other works. She stood in the gallery, her eyes scanning the crowd, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. When people approached her to comment on her work, Ireland was surprised at how easily she could talk about it. She explained how the painting represented her journey, how it reflected her past, and the strength she had found to move forward. It was a moment of realization. Ireland had come to college unsure of herself, unsure of where she fit in, but now, she knew that she belonged here. She was more than just the girl who had been rescued from a broken past. She was an artist, a student, and a person with a future. Jonathan's support had been the catalyst for her change, but it was her own courage and determination that had brought her this far. That night, as she walked back to her dorm, she felt a deep sense of peace. The journey wasn't over, but she had taken the first steps into a new life, one she had never thought possible. And no matter where it took her, she knew that she was no longer the scared, broken girl who had entered Jonathan's home. She was someone new, someone strong, someone who had finally found her place in the world. Ireland's final year at college came faster than she expected. The first day she had stepped onto campus seemed like it happened just yesterday. But now, as she stood at the threshold of graduation, she reflected on everything she had overcome and the person she had become. The journey had been long, but it had shaped her into someone who was no longer afraid of the world, someone who understood her worth. It had taken time, a lot of courage, and an incredible support system from Jonathan, but Ireland had finally found her place. As she walked across the campus, her heart was filled with gratitude. The once intimidating world of academia now felt familiar and comforting. Ireland had not only excelled in her studies, but had also found a deep sense of belonging in her art and in the friendships she had built over the years. She had started as an outsider, but now she was part of something bigger, something real. On the day of her graduation, Ireland stood in her cap and gown, surrounded by classmates and professors, but it was Jonathan's face in the crowd that she looked for. He had been there for her from the beginning, providing the stability, encouragement, and love that she needed to flourish. His belief in her never wavered, and it was that belief that gave her the strength to believe in herself. When Ireland spotted him, her heart swelled. He was beaming with pride, his smile filled with love and admiration. He had watched her grow from a scared, uncertain girl into a confident, successful young woman. As Ireland crossed the stage to receive her diploma, she caught Jonathan's eye, and in that moment, everything felt complete. She had done it. She had made it through. After the ceremony, Jonathan pulled Ireland into a warm embrace. "You did it, Ireland," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I knew you could." Tears welled up in Ireland's eyes as she hugged him tightly. She had spent so long feeling like she didn't belong, but now, she realized that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Ireland looked up at Jonathan, a sense of peace settling in her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, the words simple but powerful. "I wouldn't have made it without you." Jonathan smiled, brushing a tear from his eye. "You did all the hard work. I was just here to guide you." Later that evening, as Ireland sat in her room, reflecting on the day, she realized that her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. She had once thought that her past defined her, that her story would always be one of pain and struggle. But now, she understood that the future was hers to create. She was no longer the scared girl who had stepped into Jonathan's world all those months ago. She was a woman, full of potential, ready to make her mark on the world. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Ireland was not afraid. She was excited. She had found her voice, her strength, and the confidence to move forward. With Jonathan's unwavering support, Ireland knew there was nothing she couldn't do. As she looked toward the future, she felt a sense of gratitude and peace. The journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Ireland had not only found a home, but had also found herself. And that, she knew, was just the beginning. In this touching and inspiring story, a young girl's life transforms after being rescued from a broken home by a successful millionaire. Like many millionaire stories, this one reveals the power of kindness, transformation, and second chances. The story takes you on a journey through the challenges of overcoming fear, abuse, and self-doubt as the girl learns to trust again, thrive in an environment of love and support, and embrace her potential. Through her journey, she rises above the trauma of her past and starts to discover her own voice, carving a new path to a brighter future. Her journey resonates with many other millionaire stories, where individuals go from being lost in their circumstances to achieving greatness and finding their true purpose. With the guidance of a compassionate millionaire, she steps into a world she never imagined, filled with opportunities and the chance to reinvent herself. As this story unfolds, it brings to light the invaluable lessons that come with personal growth and the undeniable impact of believing in yourself. It's a perfect example of how millionaire stories can inspire those from all walks of life to overcome adversity and achieve their dreams. By the end of her journey, the girl learns to fully embrace her new life, and her transformation serves as a powerful reminder that anyone can rise from difficult circumstances. Millionaire stories like this highlight the importance of empowerment, resilience, and self-discovery, proving that with the right support, anyone can rewrite their story and reach for the stars.